Hi, good day sa lahat. So on today's discussion, we are going to discuss the accounting cycle. So our learning objectives for this lesson is to list and explain in brief the sequential steps in the accounting cycle. So ano nga ba yung step-by-step process or procedures that we perform during the accounting process? Second objective is to outline the steps in analyzing transactions and state the rules of source documents in analyzing events or transactions. So, ano nga ba yung use ng source of documents and ano yung rule niya in analyzing transactions or business transactions? So, yan yung mga pag-aaralan natin on this topic. But before we start, ano nga ba ang accounting cycle? Accounting cycle represents the steps or procedures used to record transactions and prepare financial statements. It is actually the series of sequential steps or procedures that is performed to accomplish the accounting process. And this accounting cycle implements the accounting process of identifying, recording, and communicating economic information. So kung natatandaan nyo, identifying, recording, and communicating economic informations are the elements of accounting. And these elements is implemented through the accounting cycle or through the accounting process. There are actually 10 steps or procedures in the accounting cycle or accounting process. So, pag sinabit nating steps, ibig sabihin, syempre, hindi natin magagawa yung last steps kung hindi na natin nagawa yung unang mga steps. So, the following steps are, first, identifications of events to be recorded or yung tinatawag nating transaction analysis. And ano yung aim or purpose of these steps? Syempre, to gather informations about transactions or events generally through the source documents. So on the first step, we identify those events that we should record on the accounting books. Through the use of source documents, tinitingnan natin yung mga transaction ba, accountable events or non-accountable events. Pag sinabi natin accountable events, ibig sabihin, these are the events that we should record in the business book or in the accounting books. Pag sinabi natin non-accountable events, so these transactions are not related to the business or those transactions that we should not record on the accounting books. So, wala tayo dong pakialam sa mga non-accountable events. So, on step 1, syempre, i-identify natin yan. Ano ba yung mga events na kailangan nating i-record? The second step is transactions are recorded in the journal or yung tinatawag nating journalizing. So, the purpose of step 2 is to record the economic impact of transactions on the firm in a journal, which is a form that facilitates transfer to the accounts. So, after nating ma-identify yung events that we should record in the accounting books, then we proceed to the step 2, wherein nire-record natin yung transactions through journal entries with the use of the general journal. And the process of recording these transactions is called journalizing. So in journalizing, our aim is to record the impact of the transactions. So ano ba yung impact niya sa major accounts ng business? Does it increase the asset, liabilities, equity, income, or expenses? So tinitingnan natin ano yung effect ng transactions and we record it in the general journals or in the journals. The third step is the journal entries are posted to the ledger. So, syempre, after nating ma-record yung lahat ng mga transactions or ma-journalize yung lahat ng mga transactions or events that is related to the business, then we proceed to the third steps or yung tinatawag nating posting. And the purpose of step 3 is, of course, to transfer the informations from the journal to the ledger for classifications. So we classify those journal entries. And we post it to its respective accounts. We post it to the ledger. And the process of posting these journal entries to the general ledger is called posting. And yung purpose niya is, of course, to transfer the informations from the journal to the ledger for classifications. So, mas nagiging madali na i-summarize yung effects ng lahat ng events or business transactions that we already journalize or we record in the journal through posting. Kasi we classify those journal entries. So, we post it in groups. So, lahat ng mga, for example, lahat ng mga transaction that is related to cash, then, pinopost natin ito sa general ledger, sa account na cash. So, lahat ng transaction that is related to account receivable, we post it in the general ledger sa specific account na account receivable. So, through posting, we group the effects of the transactions or business transactions. And take note that these first 3 steps, normally, ito ay ginagawa during the accounting period. Okay? Step 1, Step 2, and Step 3. So, these steps are normally done during the accounting period. So, after nating ma-post yung lahat ng mga transactions or journal entries sa general ledger, then we proceed with the preparations of an adjusted trial balance. And the purpose of Step 4 is to provide a listing to verify the equality of debits and credits in the ledger. So, after natin i-classify nga yung lahat ng mga transactions na ni-record natin through posting, syempre kukunin natin yung balances ng bawat accounts. So, our basis in the preparations of an adjusted trial balance is syempre yung general ledger. So, kukunin natin yung balanse ng lahat ng accounts. And then, gumagawa tayo ng listing for us to check or to verify the equality of debits and credits in the ledger. So, pagdating sa Step 4, so itong Step 4, Step 5, Step 6, until Step 9, karaniwan natin ginagawa itong steps na ito at the end of the accounting periods. So, yung Step 5, and Step 10, so we will also discuss that. Basta take note that yung first step, second step, and third step are normally done during the accounting period. And then, starting from Step 4 up to Step 9, we perform it at the end of the accounting period. And yung last step is we do it at the start of the next period. So, after we accomplish the first 3 steps in the accounting cycle during the period, and after nating makapag-prepare ng an adjusted trial balance, then we start preparing worksheet. So, the normal worksheet that we prepare is 10-column worksheets, including adjusting entries. So, on the 5th step, we start preparing worksheet, including adjusting entries. So, the first 2 columns of the worksheet is for the unadjusted trial balance. So, nakapag-prepare na kasi tayo ng unadjusted trial balance. So, we will plot this unadjusted trial balance in a 10-column worksheet. And then, we are starting identifying those adjusting entries or those transactions that are needed to be adjusted. So, ang aim nitong Step 5 is of course to aid in the preparations of financial statement. Kasi, through the use of worksheet kasi, mas nagiging madali yung preparations ng financial statements. So, kaya tayo nagpo-prepare ng 10-column worksheets. So, after nating ma-identify yung lahat ng mga transactions that are needed to be adjusted, then we proceed to the next steps. So, we adjust or we prepare adjusting journal entries. We journalize it and post it in the general ledger. So, the aim of the sixth step is to record the accruals, expirations of deferrals, estimations, and other events from the worksheet. So, those adjusting journal entries are journalized and posted. And karaniwan, yung mga adjusting entries are accruals in order for us to record those accruals transactions. And then, for us to adjust the expirations of deferrals, or in order for us to record the expirations of deferrals or those prepaid assets. So, in order for us to adjust estimations and other events. So, on the 6 steps, yung lahat ng mga journal entries, we journalize it and post it. Journalize it in the general journal, and then after journalizing, we post it in the general ledger. So, yung third column and then fourth column of the 10-column worksheet is for the journal entries. So, we plot these journal entries. So, kung ano yung effect nitong adjusting entries natin, then pinaplat natin siya dun sa tapat ng accounts na affected niyang adjusting entries. So, pinaplat natin siya sa third and fourth column ng unadjusted or worksheet or 10-column worksheet. So, yung third column is for the debit and yung fourth column is of course for the credit. So, third and fourth is para lang yan sa lahat ng mga adjusting entries. So, after nating ma-adjust na yung lahat ng transactions na na-identify natin kailangang i-adjust, then, nagpa-prepare na tayo ng financial statements. Kasi, after nating mag-journalize yung lahat ng mga adjusting entries, then, makakapag-prepare na tayo afterwards ng adjusted trial balance. And adjusted trial balance is the basis in the preparations of financial statements. So, ano ba yung purpose or aim of the preparations of financial statement? Siyempre, to provide useful informations to decision makers. Siyempre, nagpo-prepare tayo ng financial statement in order for us to give informations or useful informations to the users of the financial statement or the financial informations. So, through the preparations of income statement, balance sheet, we can communicate the results of the business to the users, internal users and outside users. So, that is the aim of the 7th step. So, after natin makapag-prepare ng financial statement through the use of adjusted trial balance, syempre, pupunta na tayo dun sa 8 steps. So, take note, kanina sinabi ko na yung first 2 column of the 10-column worksheet is for the unadjusted trial balance. And then, yung third and fourth column ng 10-column worksheet is for the adjusting entries. And then yung 6th and 7th column, 5 and 6 column of the 10-column worksheet, that is for the adjusted trial balance. And then yung 7, 8, 9, 10, so, dyan naman natin nilalagay yung financial statement or pinaplat yung financial statement, specifically yung balance sheet and income statement. So, after natin makapag-prepare ng financial statements with the use of the 10-column worksheet, then we proceed to the 8th step. And the 8th step is closing journal entries or journalize and posted. So yung 8th step is done or accomplished at the end of the accounting period. Same with the step 4, 5, and 6, 7, and 8. Siyempre, itong 8, closing journal entries. So, the purpose of the 8th step is to close temporary accounts and transfer profit to owner's equity. So, take note na meron tayong 2 types of account. Yung tinatawag natin yung temporary accounts and real accounts. Yung real accounts is yung balance sheet accounts, asset liabilities, and owner's equity. Pag sinabi natin temporary accounts, from the word itself, temporary. And those temporary accounts are needed to be closed. So, ano nga ba itong mga temporary accounts? Itong temporary accounts na to is yung mga income statement accounts. Income and expenses, to be specific. And these income and expenses accounts are closed at the end of the period. After natin makapag-prepare ng financial statement, we close or we prepare a journal entries to close these transactions or these income and expenses accounts. And we transfer whatever is the profit or loss to a permanent account or to a owner's equity account. So, kapag nakapag-prepare na tayo ng journal entry, syempre, i-journalize natin yan. Or i-record natin yan in the general journal or in the journal. And after nating i-journalize yan, then we post the journal entries or transfer the informations to the general ledger. We post the transactions. Okay? So, after nating i-post yan, syempre, dapat yung lahat ng mga income accounts and expenses account dapat close na yan or wala na silang balance at the end of the period. Kasi yung net effect ng income and expenses or yung tinatawag nating profit or loss that is close with the use of income summary accounts and tinatransfer natin yan to a permanent account or through an owner's equity account. So, after ng 8th step, after nating magpag-prepare ng closing journal entries, and after nating ma-journalize and ma-post yung entries na yan sa journals and sa ledgers, then yung 9th step is the preparation of post-closing trial balance. So, syempre, hindi kayo makakapag-prepare ng post-closing trial balance kung hindi nyo na natapos yung 8th step or kung hindi nyo patapos yung 8th step. Kaya nga tinatawag na post-closing trial balance. Ibig sabihin, na-journalize nyo na and na-post nyo na lahat ng closing journal entries. And ang matitira na lang sa post-closing trial balance is yung mga permanent accounts o yung mga asset accounts, liabilities accounts, and equity accounts. And the aim or purpose of the preparations of post-closing trial balance is to check the equality of debits and credits after the closing entries. Siyempre, titingnan natin baka kasi yung closing journal entries natin ay mali. So, for us to check if tama yung journal entries natin ng closing entries as well as tama yung posting natin ng mga journal entries or closing journal entries, syempre, to check that, we prepared the post-closing trial balance. And dapat sa post-closing trial balance, inuulit ko, ang natitira na lang dyan na accounts is asset liabilities and equity accounts or yung mga permanent accounts or real accounts na tinatawag natin sa accounting. And the last step is yung reversing journal entries or journalized and posted. So, ito yung sinasabi ko kanina na ginagawa at the beginning of the next period. So, for example, tapos na tayo sa 2021 transactions or year 2021. So, from January to December, na-journalize na natin siya, na-post ay nagawa na natin siya ng financial statements, and then nakapag-prepare na tayo ng post-closing trial balance. So, after the accounting period, or after the year 2021, then on the next year, 2022, at the beginning of the period, so for example, January, syempre January, ang ating beginning months of a whole new year. So, syempre, dyan natin gagawin or dyan natin sisimulan yung preparations ng reversing journal entries. And the aim or purpose of step 10 is to simplify the recording of certain regular transactions in the next accounting period. Yung step 10 is optional, or itong last steps na ito, yung reversing journal entries or journalized and posted, yung pag-journalize ng mga reversing journal entries and pag-post ng mga reversing journal entries, or yung pag-prepare ng reversing journal entries at the beginning of the next period is actually optional. We can actually skip this last step or not. Depende sa company or sa business if they're going to perform this last step. But this is actually optional. We can or we cannot do the 10th step. So, it is actually our choice. So, may option tayo na gawin or hindi gawin yung last steps. Basta take note, this is normally done on the next period. Okay? So, yan yung 10th steps in the accounting cycle. Take note na hindi tayo pwedeng mag-jump ng process. Hindi natin magagawa yung step 8 kung hindi pa natin nagawa yung lahat ng steps from step 1 up to 7th step. Siyempre, hindi na tayo makakapagawa ng post-closing trial balance, siyempre, kung hindi pa natin nagagawa yung lahat na 8 steps or nauunang steps. So, yan yung 10 steps in the accounting cycle. So for us to have a more detailed information on the procedures of these steps, so let us discuss the step-by-step process of the accounting cycle one by one. So let's discuss first the first 4 steps and mag-start tayo sa transaction analysis. So in step 1 or in transaction analysis, we follow these 4 basic steps. First is we identify the transactions from source documents. We indicate the accounts that is affected by the transactions. We ascertain whether the accounts is increased or decreased by the transactions. And using the rules of debit and credit, we determine whether to debit or credit the accounts to record its increase or decrease. So, ito yung step-by-step process na sinusunod natin para ma-analyze natin yung transactions and para malaman natin kung ito bang business transaction na ito is accountable or non-accountable events. So, we identify it if the transaction is accountable or non-accountable events with the use of source documents. So, source documents is actually our basis. So, ano ba yung mga example ng source documents? So, pwedeng yan ay official receipts, purchase order, sales invoices, bank deposits, and others. So, that is some of the examples only of source documents. So, yung mga source documents na yan yung tinitingnan natin para malaman natin or ma-identify natin if the transactions is A, accountable events or non-accountable events. Or for us to know if we should record the transactions or not. And after nating ma-identify which transactions to record through the use of source documents, then tinitingnan natin, we indicate the accounts that is affected by the transactions. So, ano ba yung mga accounts na affected nitong transaction na ito? Is it asset? Is it liabilities? Equity? Income or expenses? So, ini-indicate natin, tinitingnan natin, ano ba yung affected na accounts nitong transactions na ito. So, after nating ma-indicate ano yung accounts na affected ng specific business transactions, then we ascertain whether the accounts is increased or decreased. Ano ba yung effect ng transactions dun sa mga na-identify nating accounts? Is the transaction effect on the asset accounts, liabilities, equity, income, and expenses is increase or decrease. So, titingnan natin, i-ascertain natin, or i-check natin, ano ba yung effect ng transactions dito sa mga major accounts na ito. Or dun sa na-identify nating accounts na affected nung specific transactions. So, after nating ma-ascertain yung effects nung business transactions dun sa specific accounts na na-identify natin, then, using the rules of debit and credit, we determine whether to debit or credit the accounts. So, syempre, pag alam natin na kung ano yung accounts na affected ng business transactions, and then, na-ascertain na natin kung ano yung effect ng transaction na yon, then, saka lang natin ma-identify, i-debit ba natin yung transactions or i-credit. So, syempre, take note, dapat alam natin yung basic rules ng debit and credit. Kailan ba dinedebit ang asset? Kailan ba kinikredit ang asset? Same with liabilities, owner's equity, income, and expenses. So, dapat alam natin ano yung rules ng debits and credits. So, because through the use of rules of debit and credit, then i-determine natin after nating i-ascertain yung lahat ng effects or yung effects ng transactions sa na-identify nating accounts, dinedetermine natin whether to debit or credit the accounts in order for us to record its increase or decrease. And pag na-identify na natin whether to debit or credit the accounts to record its increase or decrease, then doon na tayo magpo-proceed sa step 2. We prepare journal entries or we journalize the transactions in the journals or in the general journals with the process that we called journalizing. So, gaya nga lang nabanggit ko kanina in identifying and analyzing transaction and events, so in accounting, we only identify a business transaction and analyze these transactions whether or not the transactions affects the asset, liability, equity, income, expenses of the business. So take note that only those transactions that are considered accountable events are needed to be recorded in the books of accounts. And those transactions or events that has no effects or yung tinatawag nating accountable events are not recorded or accounted. So yung basis natin yan, syempre, yung entity concept. Yun yung sinusunod natin. Bakit tayo nag-identify or bakit natin tinitingnan which is accountable and unaccountable events? Because of the entity concept. Dahil only those transactions that is related to the business are only recorded and accounted. So these accountable events are normally identified from the source documents. Since yung starting point ng accounting cycle is yung transaction and events, so by relying on source documents, transactions and events can actually be analyzed as to how they will affect the performance and financial positions of the business. So, we can identify which transactions or events are considered as accountable events with the use of these source documents. So, ano ba yung mga source documents na yan? So, these source documents are actually original written evidences that contain informations about the nature and the amounts of transactions. And these are the basis of the journal entries. Yan yung magiging basis natin pag tayo nag-journalize ng transactions. Okay? So, ano ba yung mga examples ng source document? So, as you can see, meron tayong nakikitang sales invoices and then official receipts. So, ano ba yung pagkakaiba ng dalawang yan? So, sales invoices are used for the sales of goods. So, depende. Sino ba yung issuer? Ikaw ba yung nagbenta ng goods? Or ikaw yung bumili ng goods? So, as proof na nagbayad ka ng goods, or as proof na nagkaroon ng sales ng goods, so yung sales invoice ang in-issue. So kung ikaw yung nagbenta, so mag-i-issue ka ng sales invoices as proof na nagkaroon ng sales transactions. And as proof na si customer is pwedeng nagbayad na. Kasi sa actual, hindi po lahat ng mga businesses is nag-i-issue ng official receipts. May mga business or entity na ang in-issue as proof of payment is yung sales invoices. Meron lang silang additional source documents na in-issue aside from sales invoices. Pwedeng mag-issue sila ng collection receipt. Kasi yung collection receipt, proof yun na meron silang nakolekta kay customer na payment. Pero yung pinaka-official receipt, kapag bumili ka ng goods or kapag nagkaroon ka ng sales of good, yung ini-issue ni seller is sales invoices. Okay? So, yung official receipt naman are used for the rendering of services. So, depende yan. Sino ba yung nag-render ng service? Kung ikaw yung nag-render ng service, then ikaw yung issuer. Pero kung ikaw yung hanap ng service, gumamit ng service, syempre, yung official receipt yung i-issue ng service provider as proof na nagbayad ka. So, that is sales invoices and official receipts. Another example. For example, if you buy a groceries, the grocery store will issue you a sales invoice. Gaya ng sabi ko kanina, if goods yung binenta ni entity, yun yung ini-issue nila, sales invoice. Pero kung service, yung ni-render, like for example, tuition fees, nagbayad ka ng tuition fees sa school, yung ini-issue is official receipts. So, yun yung pagkakaiba ng dalawang source documents na yan. So, ano naman yung purchase orders and delivery receipts? So, purchase order is a document issued by a buyer to a seller indicating the types, quantities, and agreed prices for products or services that the buyer intends to purchase. So, purchase order are prepared as internal control over purchases. So, si buyer, kapag may ipopurchase hang mga items, so, magpaprepare siya ng purchase order para ilagay doon ilan bang items yung bibilhin, ano yung items na bibilhin, magkano ba yung unit price ng bawat product or goods na bibilhin, and then yung total prices. So, yung purchase order na yan, ibibigay niya yan kay seller. So, yun yung magiging basis ni seller para malaman ano ba yung mga items na i-deliver nila kay buyer. So, ano naman yung delivery receipts? So, delivery receipt is a document signed by the receiver of the shipment acknowledging the receipt of the good. So, once na yung goods is ma-deliver na kay buyer, yun yung ini-issue ni seller as proof na na-deliver na nila yung goods. So, nakalagay dyan kailan yung delivery date. Sino yung nag-receive. And then, chine-check naman yan nung receiver. So, chine-check nila yung actual items kung yung mga informations na nakalagay dun sa delivery receipt is tama. So, kung kunyari yung quantity nakalagay na dyan, 5 pieces, ano yung item na nakalagay dyan, check niya dun sa actual products na pinapareceive sa kanya kung tama ba. So, pag tama, then, magsasign sila na, or magsacertify sila, si customer is magsasignature or magsasign or magsacertify na yung lahat ng merchandise is na-receive. So, kung ano yung nakalagay na details dun sa DR is isa-certify nila na na-receive nila yon in good order and in good conditions. So, yun yung pagkakaiba ng purchase order and delivery receipts. So, this is another example of source documents, statement of account and bank statement. Ano ba yung statement of account? So, statement of account is a report a business sends to its customers, listing the transactions with the customer during a period. So the payment made by the customers and any remaining balance due from the customers is makikita natin on the statement of accounts. This statement of accounts also serve as a notice of billing. So, from layman's term, yung statement of account is dyan natin makikita ano pa ba yung liability or remaining balance that is due to us. Pag tayo yung nakatanggap ng statement of account, ibig sabihin, yan yung list nung pagkakautang pa natin kay seller o kung sino man yung issuer ng statement of account. Kasi nakalagay dyan, magkano pa ba yung remaining balance. And it serves as a notice of billing. So, kung i-record natin or para malaman natin ano pa ba yung liability natin, ano pa yung remaining bill na hindi natin nababayaran, pwede natin tingnan ang statement of accounts. So, another is yung bank statement. Ano naman yung bank statement? So, a bank statement is a report issued by a bank on a monthly basis that shows the deposit and withdrawals during the period and the cumulative balance of a depositor's bank account. So, through the bank statement, makikita natin magkano ba yung cash natin na nasa bank. So, makikita natin dyan lahat ng transactions, lahat ng withdrawals natin sa bangko, and lahat ng deposits natin sa bangko through the bank statement. Okay? So, yan yung mga examples ng source documents. So, after we analyze transactions and identify those accountable from non-accountable events, so the next step that we do is to record these identified transactions or those accountable events in the journals. And the process is called journalizing. So, pag sinabi natin journal, that is a chronological record of the entity's transactions. And a journal entry shows all the effects of a business transactions in terms of debits and credit. So, bawat transactions, we initially record it in a journal. Okay? So, kaya nga tinatawag na Book of Original Entry ang General Journal. So, dito natin ginagamit nga yung isa sa mga book of accounts na tinatawag natin, which is general journal or yung mga specialized journal. Okay? So, kung naalala nyo, meron dalawang types ng journal nga. Ano nga yun? General journal and special journal. And yung general journal is the books that is called Book of Original Entry. So it is because this accounting record are the books that we use to first record those identified transactions of the business. So please note that the rules of double entry systems are always observed for its transactions. So when we record a transactions through the use of journal entries, we maintain or we check the double entry system or we maintain the double entry system or we check is the debit and credit always in equal. So we should make sure that our journal entries maintains the equality of the accounting equations and the total debits of the transactions equal the sum of its credits. Okay, so inuulit ko, journalizing refers to the recording an identified accountable event in the journal by means of a journal entry. As you can see, this is the general format of a journal entry. So, syempre, meron tayong date. Kailangan alam natin yung date ng transactions. Kailangan natin alamin kailan ba nangyari yung transactions. And then, meron tayong account title to be debited. And then, yung debit amount. Next is yung account title to be credited. And then, yung credit amount. Magkano ba yung amount that we should credit? And then, after niyang credit accounts, meron tayong nilalagay na short descriptions of the transaction. So, ito yung general format or standard content ng general journal or ng isang journal entry. So, gaya ng sabi ko kanina, meron date. So, the year and month are not written for every entry unless the year or month changes or a new page is needed. So, in journalizing, take note na sa general journal, isang beses lang natin ilalagay yung date. Like, for example, yung nire-record natin transaction is nangyari on year 2021, then ilalagay natin sa pinakataas or sa first line ng general journal yung year na 2021. And then, yung unang transactions na i-record natin, dapat ilagay natin anong month ba nangyari yung transactions and anong specific day nangyari yung transactions. Like, for example, January 1. Okay? So, uulitin lang natin isulat yung year or yung month kapag naglipat na tayo ng page. Like, for example, yung general journal nyo, yung page 1 na puno na, then isusulat natin uli sa page 2. Ano ba yung year and then ano yung month ng transactions. Okay? So, take note na hindi inuulit yung pagsulat ng month and ng year. Okay? So, ano pa yung ibang makikita natin? Siyempre, yung account titles and explanations. Yung accounts to be debited is entered in the extreme left of the first line. So, kung makikita nyo, yung extreme left of the first line of entry, doon natin nilalagay yung account title to be debited. While the account to be credited is entered slightly indented. So, yung credit entry natin is slightly indented. Okay? So, hindi natin yan tinatapat dun sa debit. Dapat slightly indented yung paka-entry nyo sa general journal or sa journal kapag gagawa kayo ng journal entry. And then, after nung credit accounts, syempre, ilalagay nyo magkano ba yung amount na i-credit nyo. Magkano ba yung amount na i-debit nyo. And then, after nyan, dapat meron kayong nilalagay na short description ng transactions. Okay? Merong short description ng transactions. Ano ba yung entry na yan? Yung short description na yan, yung use niyan is of course for future reference. Para kapag kahit ilang taon na yung nakalipas, kapag binalikan nyo yung transactions, you can easily identify ano ba yung entry na yon. Bakit kayo nag-entry? Kasi merong short description ng transactions. In journalizing transaction, syempre dapat alam natin yung mga account titles. In every business, meron tayong mga chart of accounts or meron chart of accounts na mini-maintain si entity or si business. Yung chart of accounts na yan is list of all account that is used by the business. As you can see, the screen, that is an example of chart of accounts. Kung makikita nyo, the asset accounts, liabilities accounts, equity accounts, revenue accounts, and expenses account is makikita natin yan lahat sa chart of accounts. And hindi lang yung account titles yung mapapansin yung details sa chart of accounts. As you can see, meron ding account numbers or account codes. Yung account numbers na yan are assigned to the accounts to facilitate recording, cross-referencing, and retrieval of informations. Though walang standard way of assigning account numbers, pero it should be assigned in a manners to the accounts logically. For example, dapat syempre ang mauuna sa listing is yung asset. Sunod is yung mga liabilities account. Sunod is yung owner's equity account. Sunod, expenses account. And then, the fourth is sa pagkakasunod-sunod is yung revenue accounts, and then last is yung mga expenses accounts. So each business shall formulate a chart of accounts that suits their needs. So iba-iba yung list of accounts sa bawat companies. Depende yan sa pangangailangan nila or sa needs nila. So since walang standard way in assigning the account number, so pwedeng iba-iba din yung account number sa bawat company. Basta yung use ng account code, kaya tayo nag-a-assign ng account code sa bawat account title is kasi sa pag-retrieve ng mga information, mas nagiging madali kapag merong account code yung account titles. So, pwedeng kung mag-a-assign kayo ng account code, pwede namang in a way na, kunyari, 3 numbers lang yung gagamitin ninyo. Like, for example, itong nakikita nyo, cash. Account code ng cash dyan is 110. So, pwedeng i-assign yung number sa bawat major accounts is, pwedeng sa mga asset accounts, i-assign yung number is 1. Sa liability account, i-assign yung number is 2. Sa equity account, i-assign nyo yung account number na 3. And then sa revenue, 4. And then sa expenses, 5. Para malaman nyo, maklasify nyo, ano ba yan? Asset account ba yan? Liabilities account ba yan? Expenses account ba yan? Or revenue account. And then, dun sa pangalawang digit ng account code, pwedeng ilagay nyo dyan na number is depende sa kung ano yung pagkakasunod-sunod ng code. Like, for example, sa lahat ng mga asset account, yung second digit is yung sequence on how they are listed in the chart of accounts. So, for example, lahat ng asset account, syempre, mauuna sa presentations or sa listing, syempre, yung mga current assets, and then, sunod dyan is yung mga non-current assets. So, kung ano yung pagkakasunod-sunod nila sa chart of accounts, pwedeng i-assign yung number or yung second digit ng account number ng bawat account na yan is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Depende sa kung ano pagkakasunod-sunod nila sa listing sa chart of accounts. Okay? And then yung third digit na yan, so like for example, sa cash, yung account code niya is 110, yung 0 yung third digit. So, ano ba yung nare-represent ng third digit na yan? Yung third digit na yan signifies that this account is a contra account or an account. Like for example, sa mga asset account, like for example, dito sa store equipment, pwedeng ilagay nyo dyan as third digit is 0. Like for example, 190 yung store equipment. And then, yung contra account niya na accumulated depreciation, store equipment, pwede yung i-assign yung account number niyan is 195. Ibig sabihin, nung 195 is yung 5 represent na yung account number or yung account title na accumulated depreciation store equipment is a contra asset accounts. So, take note, gaya ng sabi ko kanina, walang standard way ng pag-assign ng account number. Nakadepende yan sa company kung paano nila i-assign yung account number sa bawat account titles. Basta, make sure na yung assigning o yung pag-assign ng account number is categorized logically. Okay? Maayos yung pagkakasunod-sunod. So, this is an examples of journal entries. Meron tayong tinatawag na simple journal entry and then meron ding compound journal entries. So, ano yung pagkakaiba ng simple journal entry and compound journal entries? Siyempre, yung simple journal entry, it contains a single debit and simple credit element. So, as you can see on this example, meron lang isang single debit na affected and then merong single credit na account na affected. So, yan yung tinatawag nating simple journal entry. May isang debit, and then may isang credit account. Pero make sure that the total debit amount and credit amount is always equal. So, yung compound journal entry naman, kaya natin siya tinawag na compound journal entry kasi it contains 2 or more debits and credits. So, as you can see on the example, may isang debit transaction or may isang debit na entry. And then, merong dalawang credit accounts that is affected. So, pwede ding 2 or more debit accounts yung affected and then 1 credit account. Basta make sure that the total debit of your journal entries and the total credit of your journal entries is always equal. Okay? Okay, so let's practice the first 2 steps of accounting cycle. So, paano ba yung pag-analyze ng transactions and paano yung pag-journalize ng transactions? So, as you can see, meron dito yung example, yung paano pag-record ng initial investment ng owner. So, let's apply. Paano ba natin ito i-analyze? Ang nangyaring transaction is that an owner of a barbecue stand on January 1, 2021 invested 800 pesos cash. So, paano natin siya i-check? So, gaya ng nasabi ko kanina, we will first identify the transactions from the source documents. So, ano yung source documents? Pwedeng nag-transfer ng cash lang si owner from his personal account to the account or official account, bank account ni business. O kaya, meron siyang other source document as basis ng kanyang investment. Siyempre, yung pinaka-basis nyo yan is siyempre yung mismong pera na 800 pesos. So, kung 800 pesos yung nakita natin na in-invest ni owner, then alam na natin magkano yung amount na in-invest ni owner. So, after nating ma-identify yung transactions, after nating ma-identify na yung transaction is an initial investment, syempre, si owner na mismo, yung magbibigay ng information sa atin na, oh, ito yung 800 pesos ko is an investment. So, malalaman natin na yung perang yan na 800 pesos is an initial investment. So, after nating ma-identify yung transactions, we indicate the accounts. Either asset, liabilities, equity, income, or expenses. Ano ba yung accounts na affected ng transactions? So, kapag nag-invest si company owner or si owner, then, titingnan natin, ano ba yung affected nung pag-invest ni owner? So, nag-invest siya ng 800 pesos. So, ibig sabihin, may perang pumasok sa business. So, automatically, yung affected ng transaction na yan is cash. Yung account affected is cash. And then, for us to record the investment of the owner, ano pa yung another account na affected niyan? Since that is an initial investment, and since that investment comes from the owner, then the other account that is affected of the transaction is the owner's capital or equity account of the business. Kasi the equity account represents, of course, not only the investment but also the income or loss incurred by the company over time. So, to record the investment, for us to record the investment, yung isang account na affected yung transaction na yan is the owner's capital. So, now that we know the 2 accounts that is affected by that initial investment transactions, then the third step in transaction analysis is we ascertain whether the account or each account is increased or decreased by the transactions. So, yung 800 pesos na investment ni owner, ano yung effect niya sa cash? So, since pumasok tayo ng cash, nagkaroon ng cash si company. So, ibig sabihin, the cash account of the company or of the business is increased. And then, yung owners is nag-invest. So, ibig sabihin, nagkaroon ng increase sa investment. Nagkaroon ng increase sa owner's capital. Kaya, syempre, yung effect niyan, sa effect na owner's capital is increase din. Kasi nagkaroon ng initial investment. Dati wala, since nag-invest company owner or sa business owner, so nagkaroon ng increase sa owner's capital. Okay, take note that cash is increase. Kapag nag-debit tayo ng cash, ibig sabihin, it is increase. Pag nag-credit tayo ng cash, ibig sabihin, yung cash is nag-decrease. So, owner's capital, take note na kapag nag-credit tayo ng owner's capital, ibig sabihin, nagkakaroon ng increase sa account na owner's capital. Pag nag-debit tayo ng owner's capital, ibig sabihin nyo, nagkaroon ng decrease sa owner's capital account. So, yan, dapat alam natin yung basic rule ng debit and credit. Kasi yung last step sa transaction analysis is that with the use of the rules of debit and credit, we should determine whether to debit or credit the accounts. So, if we know kung kailan kinikredit ang asset, kailan dinidebit ang asset, kailan kinikredit ang equity, and kailan dinidebit ang equity, then we can able to identify or determine if the asset is to debit, or if the account is to debit, or if the account is to credit. So, ito yung process, paano yung pag-analyze ng transaction. So, after nating ma-analyze yung transactions, and we already identified the accounts affected, and ano ba yung effect sa accounts na yon, and is the accounts to be debited or to be credited, then we proceed to the second step, which is journalizing. So, same example, so, si owner nag-invest ng cash sa business, so paano natin siya i-journalize? So, as you can see, this is the proper way in recording the transactions. For example, ito yung unang transactions ni company. So, paano natin siya i-record sa journals? So, gaya ng sabi ko kanina, ito yung general journal or general format ng isang journal or general journal. So, merong date, merong account titles and explanations, merong PR reference, PR or posting reference, and then merong debit column and then credit column. So, date, gaya ng sabi ko kanina, hindi inuulit yung year and month unless gumamit tayo ng panibagong page. So, kung ibang page na yung ginagamit natin, saka natin uulitin yung pagsulat ng year and month. Okay? So, sa account titles and explanations, nilalagay natin dyan yung account to be debited and account to be credited. So, based on step 1, cash is increased and cash should be debited kasi nagkaroon ng increase sa cash. Kaya natin dinebit yung cash. Okay? The first account or the account that is debited is to be entered at the extreme left. At the extreme left, kaya kung makikita nyo, nasa extreme left side siya ng general journal. And then, yung accounts to be credited is entered slightly on the next line. So, since that is an investment, and nagkaroon ng increased owner's capital, kaya natin credit yung owner's capital account. And yung account na credit natin is slightly indented on the next line. Siyempre, nilalagay natin ng debit amount and then credit amount, yung transactions. And we should make sure that the total debit and the total credit of that journal entry is always in equal. So, kung mapapansin nyo, meron ding short description. Kasi, yan yung standard way in journalizing. Dapat meron tayong brief descriptions ng transactions. And kapag sinulat natin yung brief descriptions, dapat it is also slightly indented from the credit entry. Dapat indented din siya. Hindi siya nakatapat dun sa credit entry, kundi slightly indented yung descriptions. Kasi yung description na yan, kaya na tayo naglalagay ng descriptions sa journal entry entry kasi yan ay ginagamit natin as reference or future reference natin yan. Para kapag binalikan natin yung transaction na yan, madali nating ma-identify. Ano ba yung transactions na yan? Ano ba yung entry na yan? Bakit tayo nag-entry? Okay? And then, sa bawat entry or sa bawat journal entry, lagi po tayong merong lagwat na isang line. So, bago kayo mag-entry dyan ng panibagong journal entry, dapat merong isang line. Mag-i-skip tayo ng isang line. Okay? So, ganun yung pag-journalize ng transactions. So, second example, same procedure. Step 1, transaction analysis. So, anong nangyari naman dito is nagkaroon ng acquisitions of inventory. So, on January 5, 2021, the business purchased inventory for 480 cash. Ibig sabihin, bumili ng inventory si business and then nagbayad siya ng 480 cash. So, the first step is identify the transaction from source documents. So, ano yung pwede nyo tingnan to identify the transactions? Pwede yung purchase order, pwede yung official receipts, delivery receipts. So, yun yung ilan sa mga source document na pwede natin tingnan para ma-identify natin yung transactions. Next, ano yung accounts affected ng transactions? Since nag-purchase ng inventory, ibig sabihin, inventory is one of the accounts that is affected by the transactions. And then, dahil sa pagbili ng inventory, nagbayad ng cash, 480 cash. So, ibig sabihin, inventory and cash is the two accounts na affected ng transactions na yan. And third step, ano yung effect ng transactions? Is the accounts to be increased or to be decreased? Yung inventory ba to be increased or to be decreased? Yung cash ba is to be increased or to be decreased? Since inventory, bumili tayo ng inventory, so ibig sabihin, nagkaroon tayo ng inventory. And ibig sabihin nun, nagkaroon ng increase sa inventory. And since nagbayad tayo ng cash para makabili ng inventory, so obviously, yung cash is bumaba. So, cash is decrease. And yung last, using the rules of debit and credit, i-determine natin kung i-debit ba natin yung inventory or i-credit natin yung cash. Since that is both an asset account, so take note that ang asset is kinikredit natin pag nagkaroon ng decrease and dinedebit natin kapag nagkaroon ng increase. Kaya syempre, yung inventory, since nagkaroon ng increase sa inventory, so yung inventory i-debit natin. And since nagkaroon ng decrease sa cash, kaya yung cash yung i-credit natin. So, paano naman natin siya i-record sa journal? So, the second transaction is yung bumili ng inventory for 480 cash. Gaya ng sabi ko kanina, we skip one line bago tayo mag-entry ng panibagong journal entry sa general journal. And ang yung year and month is hindi inuulit unless gumamit tayo ng panibagong page. Also, take note that yung PR or posting reference, kapag nasa step 2 pa lang tayo, which is journalizing, we leave it blank. Kasi ginagamit natin yan kapag tayo ay nag-post na sa general ledger. So, magkakaroon lang yan ng laman or ng entry or ng code kapag na-post na natin yung mga transactions. Okay, so to record the purchase inventory, ito yung magiging entry natin. Nag-debit tayo ng inventory kasi nagkaroon ng increase sa inventory. And then, nag-credit tayo ng cash kasi nagbayad tayo ng cash. Nabawasan yung cash natin amounting to 480,000. So, make sure that the total debit and credit is always equal. And also, the accounting equation is also checked na asset is equals liabilities and equity. So, lagi din natin titingnan yung entry natin. Kung na-maintain yung accounting equations and then na-maintain yung equality ng debit and credit. So, after the debit and credit entry, so meron tayong short descriptions of the transactions for us to have a future reference. So, nakalagay dyan sa description, syempre, ano ba yung nangyaring transactions. So, since nag-purchase tayo ng inventory, kaya yung nilagay natin is to record the purchase inventory. So, yan yung tamang paraan on how to journalize business transactions. Okay? So, ito yung ilang mga examples of proforma entries. So, kapag nagkaroon ng owner's investment, ano yung proforma entries or ano yung entry natin? So, kung cash yung investment ni owner, syempre yung i-debit natin is cash kasi nagkaroon ng increase sa cash. And for us to record the investment of the owner, ginagamit natin yung account na owner's capital. So, kunyari, yung pangalan ng owner is Francisco. So, nakalagay dapat dyan, Francisco Kuwait Capital. Yun yung specific account na gagamitin nyo. Hindi yung word na owner's capital. So, kung sino yung owner, yun yung ipapalit nyo dyan sa word na owners. And then, merong capital na word. So, yan yung proforma entry for us to record the owner's investment. Pero kung hindi naman cash yung in-invest ni owner, kunyari equipment, then imbis na cash yung i-debit ninyo, ilalagay nyo dyan na as debit is equipment. Then, don't forget to put the debit amount and then yung credit amount sa entries. And then, yung short description ng transactions. So, paano naman kapag nagkaroon ng acquisition of equipment on cash basis? Ibig sabihin, bumili kayo ng equipment on cash basis. Nagbayad kayo agad. So, yan yung magiging entry ninyo. Debit equipment, credit, cash. Kasi, nagbili kayo ng equipment, kaya nagkaroon ng increase in equipment, kaya kayo nag-debit ng equipment. Since nagbayad kayo agad, so ibig sabihin, nabawasan yung cash nyo, kaya kayo nag-credit ng cash. And then, merong short description to record acquisition of equipment. So, meron ding debit amount and then credit amount. So, paano naman kung nag-acquire kayo ng equipment on account? So, imbis na yung i-credit nyo is cash, yung i-credit nyo is accounts payable. Kasi, bayarin nyo pa yan kay supplier. Kasi, yung pagkakabili nyo is on account. Hindi kayo nagbayad agad. Okay? Kaya yung description nyo to record acquisitions of equipment on account. And then, don't forget to put the debit amount and then yung credit amount. And dapat lagi yang equal. So, paano naman kapag nag-acquire kayo ng inventory on cash basis? Ibig sabihin, bumili kayo ng inventory and then nagbayad kayo agad. So, kaya kayo nag-debit na inventory kasi nagkaroon ng increase in inventory. Kasi bumili kayo ng inventory. So, credit cash kasi nagbayad kayo agad. Same nung nagbili tayo ng equipment dun sa unang example or proforma entry kapag nagbili ng equipment. Since ang binili naman natin dito is inventory, so syempre yung gagamitin yung account to record the transaction is yung inventory account. Kasi inventory naman yung binili dito sa fourth example. And then, yung short description nitong transactions. Lagi nyong lalagyan. Huwag nyong kakalimutan. So, paano naman kapag nag-acquire ng inventory on account or on credit? Pag sinabing on credit, ibig sabihin utang pa. Hindi pa tayo nagbayad. So, magde-debit tayo ng inventory and then credit accounts payable since utang pa yung inventory yung binili natin. And then, magkano yung debit? Magkano yung iti-credit? And then, ano yung description? To record acquisitions of inventory on account. Another example, paano naman kapag nag-settle kayo ng accounts payable or nagbayad kayo ng pagkakautang nyo? So, dun sa last natin example, before this 6 example, nagbili tayo ng inventory on account or on credit. Paano kung yung pagkakautang natin dun sa pagbili ng inventory, binayaran na natin or sinettle na natin? So, ang magiging entry nyo is debit accounts payable. Bakit kayo nag-debit ng accounts payable? Kasi nabawasan na yung utang nyo kasi sinettle nyo na nga yung utang nyo. And take note na dinidebit natin ang liabilities account kapag nagkaroon ng decrease and kinekredit natin ang liability account kapag nagkaroon ng increase. Since nagsettle kayo ng accounts payable, and accounts payable is a liability, kaya natin dinebit yung accounts payable. And magkano? Siyempre, lalagay nyo magkano. Ano yung i-credit nyo? Cash. Kasi, nagbayad nga kayo eh. So, paano nyo ba masasettle yung accounts payable nyo kung hindi kayo magbabayad ng cash? So, kung hindi cash yung pinangbayad nyo, yun yung i-credit ninyo. Okay? Pero kung cash ang pinangbayad nyo para masettle yung accounts payable nyo, then cash yung i-credit nyo. And then, after the credit entry, meron kayong short description again para i-describe yung transactions na nangyari. And then, magkano yung debit amount, and then, yung credit amount. Pag nagkaroon ng sales of inventory on cash basis or credit, ito yung magiging entry ninyo. Ibig sabihin, nagbenta kayo ng inventory on cash. Nagbayad agad si customer. So, debit cash kapag cash basis. Yung pakabenta nyo ng inventory. Pero kung on credit, ibig sabihin utang, nagbenta kayo ng inventory pero hindi nagbayad agad si customer. So, imbis na cash yung i-debit nyo, ang i-debit nyo is account receivable. Take note, yung accounts receivable is an account that we use to account our receivables to customers. So, since that is a sales transactions and sales transaction is an income transactions, kaya tayo nag-credit ng sales. Kasi, para ma-record natin yung sales na nangyari, yung sales ng inventory. So, imbis na inventory yung tig-credit natin, sales yung tig-credit natin in order for us to record the revenue that is resulted by the sales of inventory. Take note that sales is a revenue account. And we credit revenue account kapag nagkaroon ng increase. And we debit it kapag nagkaroon ng decrease. In this case, since nagkaroon na ng sales, ibig sabihin, nagkaroon ng increase in revenue account, which is sales. Kaya natin i-credit yung sales account. And then, again, merong short description. So, kung cash, on cash yung pakabenta nyo, yung i-record nyo or ilalagay yung short description is to record cash sales. Pero kung credit, to record credit sales. So, yan yung entry nyo kapag nagkaroon ng sales of inventory, either on cash basis or on credit basis. Next, paano naman kapag nagkaroon ng collections of account receivable? So, yung customer nyo na merong pagkakautang sa inyo is nagbayad na. Sinettle na yung kanilang liability sa inyo. So, ang magiging entry nyo is debit cash. Kasi nagkaroon nga ng collection. Ibig sabihin, meron kayong natanggap na cash. And since sinettle na ni customer yung kanyang liability sa inyo, so yung receivable nyo is, or yung account receivable account nyo is i-credit nyo. Kasi nabawasan yung receivable nyo kay customer since sinettle na nga ni customer. Take note that cash and account receivable is an asset account. And we debit asset account kapag nagkaroon ng increase, and we credit it kapag nagkaroon ng decrease. Since sinettle na nga ni customer yung kanyang accounts payable sa inyo, kaya natin i-credit yung account receivable. So, make sure that meron kayong short descriptions to identify the transactions. So, ano naman yung proforma entries kapag nagkaroon ng payment of expenses or receipt of bill? So, kapag nagkaroon ng payment of expenses, ang magiging entry nyo is yung specific expense account, kung ano yung binayaran yung expense. For example, electricity. So, yung i-debit nyo is electricity expense. Kung yan naman is water expense. So, kung ano yung nature ng expense, yun yung gagamitin yung account. Okay? Kung ano yung specific expense account, yun yung i-debit niyo. So, kung nagkaroon ng payment of expense, ibig sabihin, nagbayad kayo. So, yung i-credit nyo is cash. Okay? And then, kung ang nangyari is receipt of bill, and then, hindi nyo siya binayaran, so iba yung magiging entry nyo. Ang entry nyo, syempre, debit expense, pero hindi na cash yung inyong i-credit. So, ano yung inyong i-credit? So, let's see. So, kapag nagkaroon ng receipt of bill, or meron kayong bill of expense na natanggap, pero hindi nyo naman sinettle, ito yung magiging entry ninyo. Kung ano yung nature of expense na binayaran ninyo, or kung ano yung specific expense na binayaran ninyo, yun yung i-debit ninyo. Following the expense recognition principles na we record expense at the time kung kailan natin ginamit yung expense or yung service, and hindi kung kailan tayo nagbayad. So, even though hindi pa natin sinettle yung expense, hindi pa tayo nagbayad, we should record the expense. Kasi, we are following the expense recognition principles or the accrual basis of accounting. Kaya kung ano yung binayaran yung specific expense, yun yung i-debit niyo. And then, credit accounts payable kasi hindi nyo pa naman sinettle. So, that is your liability kay service provider. O kung sino man yung service provider ng service or ng expense na yan. So, after the credit account or credit entry, ano yung description? To record receipt of bills or any other descriptions describing the transactions. Okay? Paano naman kapag nagkaroon ng owner's withdrawal? So, ito yung magiging proforma entry nyo kapag nagkaroon ng owner's withdrawal. For example, yung owner is si Francisco. So, ang ilalagay nyo dyan is Francisco quit withdrawal. And then, yung debit amount. And then, kung cash yung winidraw ni Francisco, so cash yung i-credit natin. Kasi nabawasan yung cash ni business. Kasi winidraw ni owner. Kaya tayo nag-credit ng cash. And then, magkano yung cash? So, yun yung magiging credit amount natin. And then, another, yung short description. Ano ba yung nangyaring transactions? To record withdrawals of owners. So, yan yung ilan sa mga proforma entries na pwede nyong tandaan for you to have an idea. Ano ba yung proforma entries kapag yan yung mga specific transactions na nangyari. Okay? So, I hope naintindihan natin kung paano ba yung procedures na accounting process or accounting cycle. So, naintindihan natin yung brief descriptions ng 10 steps or procedures in accounting cycle as well as yung transaction analysis and yung journalizing. On the next video, we will tackle or we will answer a problem or we will apply this accounting cycle in a problem. So, mag-start tayo sa transaction analysis up to the 4th step, which is the preparation of an adjusted trial balance. So, see you there. Thank you.